True peace, Kens. Man, think y'all gonna like this one, man. This is a bombshell. Vice President Pence. Oh yeah, peep the slang. I've tried several times in the past to get it out and was thoroughly squashed by Rod and the DOJ and the FBI to a horrible extent. I tried again in 2015, tried to end run them and go to the Department of Homeland Security. And once it got I went there with a pile of evidence and some video and audio recordings. It got too large for them, I suppose, but it made its way back to the FBI and DOJ. And they came down on us again. This was 2015. In 2016, I made a video discussing quite a bit of this in the effort to get it to Devin Nunes, who was head of the House Intelligence Committee at the time. But there was interference from one of the people involved and he messed that all up. So it went largely unnoticed. But in the video, I tried to warn President Trump about the people he was dealing with daily, and especially Rod, and things like that as they were working together to remove them, trying to compromise the people around them. Inaudible when the possible could. Interviewer. Now, how were Rod Rosenstein and Mike Pence connected? Interviewing. That group, I mean, they're all interconnected one way or another. That particular group was Rod, VP Pence, Paul Ryan. That was the core of that group. Rod was in there, but that was the core of it. It was an attempt where Rod was the brilliant legal mind behind it to remove President Trump under the 25th Amendment. Peter Slang. The Inaudible had an operational name for it in the beginning. Run silent, run deep, but nobody really used it after a while, and it didn't make any sense because it was such a small group. But that's an old movie about somebody being passed over for a promotion, which they both felt they were. Now, VP Pence hated President Trump because he had taken his slot as rightful president. Peter Slang. He felt that he did, and Paul Ryan was actually considered running as well for the vice presidential slot, and Mitt Romney was also involved, but they thought President was all an outsider who was not paid his dues. They just didn't like him. So once Vice President was in there, once President Trump was elected, and obviously Vice President Pence, he just walked away and everything became very quiet. That was their mole inside, so he could run interference and make certain things and just keep tabs on the president and manage him. Interviewer. So, was this a friendly relationship between Mike Pence and Rosenstein, or was there any kind of leverage being placed on the president or the vice president at the time? Interviewee. There was leverage on Mike Pence because of surveillance from way back in 2013 range. They had gotten FISA warrants to explode, and Rod had that. He wanted the vice president slot himself. Then if they could remove President Trump, Vice President Pence becomes president, and Rod felt that he would be the natural selection for it. Paul Ryan felt differently, as did Mitt Romney, but that was the overall goal. Each one of them vying for the vice presidential slot. Peep the slang. Rod thought he was the clear winner because of his legal brilliance and his management of the Mueller investigation and special counsel and things. You know, he would be the one to remove the president, damage him so thoroughly he could be removed, and he deserved it. Interviewer. Okay, do you know what type of leverage would have existed over the vice president? Interviewee. The vice president has had homosexual relationships in the past. It's not a problem. Many of them were adults. This is something he had done throughout his time in the Congress. When he became governor, he had thought that he was free to explore them more. There were two specifically that had recorded. They had recorded. Okay. One gentleman, roughly 20 years his junior, they had a fairly steady relationship. There was one about half his age that was much more sporadic because it was more dangerous, harder to get time alone. This person would introduce others, bring people with him. He'd have people waiting when he showed up. And it was that second one that introduced younger and younger people. This is whomever he's 17 and he's really 15. This is whomever he's 15 and he's really 13. And Rod and Roberts, Chief Justice Roberts, a lot of the younger people involved, the ones that were brought as favors, was supplied by Jeffrey Epstein's channels. Through his channels, his people, we were able to get FISA warrants because Chief Justice Roberts had vice court and helped prepare them. But it was also Epstein was an intelligent asset of some type to various agencies around the world. They used his information. They exploited it for their own good. So when he was here or his people were here, it was easy enough to justify a VISA warrant on them. They would enact a warrant, surveil everything, document it, but they would not help and they would not save the child. They would not, reveal it. It was more important for them to have the leverage on everything. And of course, this was under their own corrupt ideas, but under Rod, his tutelage. And they wanted the leverage. Interviewer: Do you know? Do you have any idea how Epstein and Supreme Court Justice Roberts initially would have met or how that relationship would have developed? Interviewee: How they would have met? I think they met when he was under Bush, not too long after he was appointed, somewhere along in there, just meeting powerful people, something like that. How did help him? How did he help him with his adopted children? From what was said there and what was, discussed openly in this little dirty trick squad, the children are not genetically brother and sister, but they're raised that way. So that's more valuable to them. One, if not both, were originally from Wales, but they were in the Epstein's channel and were easily removed from their version of foster care to Ireland, which has much more adoption type records. He facilitated this for Robert so he could adopt them both at the same time. There was a little gap, but it was just paperwork, and Epstein had done that for him. So they met, they worked together, and he was doing favors at some point. Interviewer: Was this something Supreme Court Justice Roberts could have paid for? Or is this, a favor exchange to Epstein to link him up with these children? Or interviewee: I don't know at that point. It's possible it could be either one. I don't think there would be a payment at that point. It was more for his position. There would be some type of favor, but I don't know either one was done. He facilitated. Interviewer: Interviewee: Was there a payment? Was it a favor? I can't say. Interviewer: Okay. Can you go into any more details on Supreme Court Justice Roberts with these children and the circles that he ran in as far as you're aware? Interviewee: Children are often used as the commodity, a way to buy yourself into certain inner circles. Peep the slang. And these people are all wealthy. They're all powerful, and they don't trust you unless you're all as compromised as they are. So you provide children to them, your children, adopted children, whatever. This is how they trust you. You're as dirty as they are. You cannot be exposed because you can't expose them. They can't expose you. If everybody's just as dirty, you're safe. And like I said, this is a way for them to buy their way into these inner circles and get access to whatever. Children are the pavement and the dirt and the control. Interviewer: now, who else would we want to talk to? Or is there any additional documentation that we could pursue to solidify what you're saying here today? Interviewing: yep, Yanni Phonetic has copies of the videos from the FISA surveillance. It was discussed, but I can't prove it. That Roberts had a copy. Rod Rosenstein certainly has a copy. Sean Henry of CrowdStrike, who was FBI at the time, he took 2 copies back to the FBI with him. So the copies were made, and then that was actually Sean Bridges who encrypted them and gave them keys. So there are copies out there. Interviewer: and who would be on these tapes most likely as far as from your conversation in the Dirty Trick Squad? Interviewee: from just those tapes, when I was talking about the copies. Interviewer: Interviewee: that would be Roberts. Excuse me. Those would be Pence and his 2 lovers. And the younger ones. There were also, they would do the same thing. Illegal surveillance, or sometimes inaudible. This was mostly in the country. Illegal surveillance with Roberts. Children and whomever they were with, they set it up. They knew that they weren't going to be exposed because it's Chief Justice Roberts' children. And please keep in mind that these children have been abused since birth, and I don't want anything else happening. They've already lived through hell. They don't need anything else, but they were getting loaned out for these different groups, and they did surveil many of them. Interviewer: okay, now you also said in past discussions that there was a plot that Roberts was allegedly a part of, where they discussed murdering other judges on the Supreme Court under the Hillary Clinton administration. Can you give me some amplifying details on that? Interviewee: this is something the FBI set up under their guidance, their political people, going to be a false flag. This had gone out 2 years almost before the election, and it was a sovereign citizen group. Obama did not want any terrorism unless it was white terrorism. So this is a sovereign citizenship group, that that the FBI had infiltrated and armed and instigated against other targets. They were, for the most part, pro-America, but they were racist in some of their origins. A lot of them were divorced fathers with a grudge against the court system anyway, and the FBI people had infiltrated and exploited this. They moved them up to the level of assassinating federal judges. Political people, things like that. You want the names? I could tell you. So anyway, part of their inaudible was various types of attacks on the Supreme Court to take down as many judges as they could. And Roberts was aware of this. He actually provided some scheduling because apparently the justices are all not there at one time. They come and go as they please. And these 3 will be working on something. These 3, and he provided this to the group so they could finalize their plan. Peep the slang. They were very, very close to what they were trying to do. They were given explosive, all types of automatic weapons. They had rocket launchers, and they were very close to it. They were going to assassinate Dennis Saylor, a federal judge in Massachusetts, Martha Coakley, Lisa Monaco, and her family. They were going to make that look like a home invasion and film it until later when they needed it. And this was their initial attack plan. And then the Supreme Court, this was a group that got infiltrated on their request. And when I found out they were doing that, they were going to attack these judges. They were going to attack the Supreme Court. I tried to end run them. I had minders. People kept tabs on me. I had FBI minders, but I tried to end run them and expose it. I took all of the evidence and went to Homeland Security, who were overwhelmed, and called in the FBI. And then the DOJ came right back to me, and they picked me up just a few weeks later when they found who I was. The damage to their plots had been done. They did get close to assassinating people up there. Lisa Monaco. The judges were under 24/7 security. Martha Coakley had in-state security, and it did prevent them from going after Supreme Court. Although their plans were all out, they had the maps, they had the weapons, they had everything planned. So at least it prevented something like that in the viewer. Now, were the teams that were supposed to do the actual operation against the judges, were those Americans or were they foreign? Interview it. No, these were Americans. Interviewer. Okay, interviewee. A third would be the sovereign citizen group, and 2/3 would be the FBI people or people working with the FBI. They were going to get rid of them anyway. And actually, I have recordings of their planning on the phone with me as, part of this group. And then they did not hang up the phone. They did not kill the phone. And we were listening to them talk about killing me and my wife, things like that. And another time they actually butt dialed me, and they were talking about, he was on the phone talking to various people about their plans, about who they were going after and what they were going to do to us because we know too much and we were outside at the time. So they could not do their plan. We got the people under surveillance. We saved them, got credit for saving them. They were very upset that their plans had gone to crap. They were very upset with me, especially when they came and picked me up, but it stopped it. Their plans were written out. They had maps. They had surveillance. They had quite a bit of equipment. Interviewer. What was the timeline they were hoping to do this in? The interviewee. This would be right after within the first year of Hillary Clinton's presidency. She was not supposed to lose. So this was all planned up, and it was more than just then. It was twofold. They wanted to pack the court and take out as many as they could. Roberts was actually helping because he didn't want to be one of them, and he wanted some choice in who would on the bench. Okay, some choice in who would on the bench after that. He wanted to maintain some form of control, so he did provide information. But this was to be done within the first year of Hillary Clinton's campaign so that they could ban firearms as well and impact the court. So they had plenty of time to do that. That was their two main goals. Interviewer. Do you believe the death of Antonian Scalia was a part of this same plot, or is that, do you know if this was a separate interview? It was the same people. He was a backup plan. He was their biggest threat, being the most conservative justice. Peep the slang. I'm gonna stop right there, man.